right, good morning. Good morning. What a campus, what a room, what a privilege it is to be up here and share a little bit about our work at Susan Crown Exchange. We are a grant-making foundation whose mission is to prepare young people to thrive in a rapidly changing world. And over the next 15 minutes or so, I'll share about our lessons learned and experiences with long-term strategic collaborative grant-making. But that is not where I'm going to start this conversation. Instead, I'm going to take us back in time. So to the early 2000s, in my junior year of high school, my junior year of high school. Now, I went to a public high school in the Chicago suburbs. There were about 3,500 students, and it was a highly competitive atmosphere. And this was especially true with college admissions. You were doing everything you could to build your resume, to be a competitive applicant for universities. And the crown jewel at our school was to be on the executive board for one of our student clubs. The 4 to 5 students who were on exec were the ones who went on to get the strongest recommendation letters, go to the top universities. And I wanted to be one of those students. So it's my junior year. I've been accepted to the club. I've submitted an application to be on exec, and I've made it to the final round. And it's a group interview. Now there's 4 of us. I know the other 3 students, and they are, just rock stars. They're A+ students. They have a track record of service. They're wonderful humans. And then there was me, and I played sports. At the end of the conversation, I feel pretty good about my performance, but then the club sponsor asks a defining question to all of us, and he asked, "Who is your hero? Who is your hero?" So we all kind of sit up in our seats, and the first person goes, and they say, Martin Luther King. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh yeah, Martin Luther King, that's a great answer, right? Of course, MLK had a dream, inspired an entire nation. That's a great answer. Second person goes, Abraham Lincoln. Thinking, all right, here is another good answer, right? Lincoln calling us to listen to our better angels. Another good answer, but another one off the board. The third person goes, and they say, Mother Teresa. The saint, the symbol of service. So then they come to me, and I'm last, and I say, all right, Kevin, who is your hero? And you have to imagine at this point, my 16-year-old brain is working hard. I'm thinking, all right, not MLK, not Lincoln, not Mother Teresa, someone who's making a difference, something profound. And then it hit me. This guy. Now at this moment, some of you, in fact, most of you might be wondering who this is. Dick Butkus, middle linebacker for the Chicago Bears from 1965 to 1973, and my childhood hero. Now at this time, most of you might also be wondering why I thought it was appropriate to say Dick Butkus in the same realm of Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln, and Mother Teresa. And to that I would say, have you seen this GIF? I mean, look at this tackle. Dick Butkus played the game of football with an unrelenting force that was mesmerizing for a kid growing up in Chicago. I remember having what I would call a healthy obsession with Dick Butkus, right? I would tear through my parents' old VHS tapes, and I would find, old recordings of Bears Packers 1969, and I would toss it in the VCR, and I would watch Butkus just tackle people over and over and over again. And then, when I was 10, he released his autobiography. It was called Flesh and Blood. And this book changed my life. Now, I wasn't much of a reader at that point in my life. As I said, I played sports. But this book I read. It sat by my nightstand. I wrote book reports on 3rd grade and in 4th grade and in 5th grade. And I'm proud to say that today I am passing this book down to the next generation. So this is my son, Will. He was 3 years old at the time of this picture. And my wife asked me the other day if I realize I'm brainwashing the kids. To that, I just said, I'm doing what any good dad in Chicago does. You take your toddler, you have him pose with flesh and blood, you take a picture, and you send it to your brothers. Now, what you also don't know is that Will's now 5 years old. He's learning how to read, and I showed him this picture the other day, and so he excitedly ran over to the bookcase, and he grabbed the book, and he brought it over, and he starts holding it up, and trying to make out the words, and he goes, "What? What is a butt kiss?" What you also don't see in this picture is that inside the front cover is a handwritten note and an autograph from the one and only Dick Butkus. And the true life-changing moment for me was not the release of this autobiography, but it was the day in 1997 when my dad took me to the local bookstore to meet my childhood hero. And I remember that day very clearly, this crisp autumn day in Chicago. The line extended out that front door, down the sidewalk. I was eagerly, but still patiently, waiting to meet my hero. And then there was this moment when I looked up and I realized Dick Butkus was not my hero. It was my dad. So my dad and I were as close as a father and son could be. We bonded through sports initially, but he was very much my coach on and off the field. I admired him for his character, his compassion, his wisdom. In baseball, whenever I would be struggling at the plate, my dad would quietly walk up to the fence while I was in the on-deck circle, and he would whisper 3 pieces of advice to me. Keep your eye on the ball, swing hard, and follow through. And this advice worked every time. It got me out of my head, it slowed down the game, and it allowed me to just swing. But when I was a senior in high school, in the midst of a pretty promising baseball season, my dad unexpectedly passed away. And I remember that day very vividly as well. I remember those feelings of devastation, of fear, of loneliness. I remember falling into a deep slump on and off the field. But I also remember what came next, and that was the next game. The season continued. I remember my coaches pulling me aside, my teammates picking me up. I remember my older brothers coming home from college. In every game, I would look up in the stands and I would see my 2 older brothers sitting with my mom cheering me on. Now, we were very much grieving in individual ways, but we were persevering together. It was my mom who would now walk up to the fence to whisper these pieces of advice to me. My brothers who would stand on the foul line with arms folded and give me little nods of encouragement. And by the time I went into college, I was undoubtedly different. I felt different than so many of my classmates. And there was just something like burning inside me. I just couldn't quite capture it. I couldn't really articulate it. But by the time I was a senior in college, I was in a full-blown quarter-life crisis. These 3 lines kept ringing in my head over and over and over again. They were baseball advice that I was now applying to real life. It was swing hard, but swing hard for what? What was it that drove me? The best companies in the world came to recruit at my business school, and I had interviews and I had offers, but any time an interviewer would ask me why I wanted that job, I couldn't answer them. So at 21, I went to my mom for advice. My mom was a 4'11" marvel. She knew love and life and business. She knew how to help her 3 grown sons transition through all of life's major milestones. And she did it with unparalleled grace, while grieving her own loss and while soon beginning a battle of her own with stage 4 ovarian cancer. So my mom had all the wisdom I needed. And I went to her and I said, "Mom, what should I do with my life? She looked at me. She said, Kevin, there is no way to know what your path holds. But what I can say is don't settle. Just don't settle. And so this advice, my parents' advice, took me on a journey after school from consulting to the classroom to coaching all across the country. And slowly I began to realize that what drove me was this intense desire to show up for people in the same way that so many had showed up for me. And in philanthropy, I get to pursue that drive every day. We all get to pursue that drive every single day. And so in 2018, I joined Susan and the team at Susan Crown Exchange, where we don't settle. For 15 years, we have funded in youth development, youth mental health, social emotional learning, and through grant making and strategic partnerships with several people in this room, we have been able to achieve much more impact than you ever would have expected from a small foundation out of Chicago. We have seeded new accelerators for youth mental health nonprofits. We have helped new research centers launch. We have spearheaded national initiatives to train 1 million coaches in youth mental health. And it's all driven by this internal ethos to punch above our weights. And that ethos feels especially important today, which, as this room certainly knows, and as we've been discussing the last 2 days, we are in a time like no other. Communities across the country are navigating an era where they feel disconnected, unsupported, on edge, where mental health struggles are commonplace across generations. And as we've heard, there is a need for philanthropy in particular to show up and to show up differently. We need to think big. We need solutions that support millions. We need those moonshots. And as we know, we can't really do that alone. We have to think about how to leverage each other's work, to complement each other's work, to ensure a $500,000 investment here, 5 million there, actually make a dent in the systems change that is so needed in this space. Over the last 5 years, I have personally been a part of launching 3 pooled funds across our portfolios, each one comprised of different funders, comprised of different governance structures, but tied together by this common idea that if we were to work together, genuinely work together, we could do more together than we ever could alone. The After School Recovery and Opportunity Fund was an effort of 7 national funders to help stabilize and stimulate the after-school environment in the months after the COVID-19 pandemic. The Responsible Tech Youth Power Fund is an initiative to help ensure that young people have a voice at the table in holding big tech accountable. And the Fund for Sport Equity is a newly launched collaborative to help unlock the power of sports for the 40 million kids who play every year, and to use its unique power to help them heal from trauma and stress. But it's not always easy, right? Collaboration is hard, and we've heard that in the previous conversations. We all likely have experience where collaboration actually falls short of its promise. So I want to share just 3 of the themes that I have seen kind of act as barriers to genuine strategic collaboration. The first is NIH, which stands for Not Invented Here. Not invented here. I learned this specifically from Susan Crown on the first day of work. You know, this idea that we all have, right, around credit. We say we don't want it, but we do. Right? We say it doesn't matter if we're the owner or the leader, but we do. The issue is that it prevents genuine collaboration, at least sustainable collaboration. And so how do we overcome a barrier like that? The second barrier that I have seen in my work is perhaps our favorite word in the English language, and that is bureaucracy. Right? Just out of curiosity, I Googled bureaucracy just before this presentation, and one of the definitions I found was excessively complicated administrative procedures. I thought, that sounds right. Like, could you imagine an environment when 10 organizations bring excessively complicated administrative procedures to the table? Like, that's not going to work. And sometimes that's what happens. The third is perhaps the hardest barrier to overcome because it's maybe the thing we want most as funders, or at least that we have built into our mindset, and that is control. Inherently, in a collaborative environment, you lose control, right? Who is making the decisions? Are we willing to defer, to delegate, to build consensus? Are we willing to act outside our typical decision-making processes? When these things are present, right, these collaborative environments are bound to fail. They're bound to be slow or unfocused or short-lived. But I've seen it work. In the 3 examples, I've seen it work. When you spend the time building the trust up front, when you create the environment that really honors the unique voice and perspective of each funder at the table and allowing them to genuinely contribute to the direction of that collaborative funding, you can really achieve remarkable success. I've seen it improve just the grant making itself. Not only can we dream bigger, but we can be more sustainable in those efforts. We move away from the codependent grantor, grantee model. When 1 of 10 funders decides to change their strategy, which inevitably will happen, there's still 9 more to carry that work forward. The de-risked environment of funding among others and funding a portfolio of organizations creates a comfort zone for many as well. I've also seen it improve capacity building, right? How often have all of us in this room told our grantees that it's not just about the funding. We can provide other non-monetary value. But often that's easier said than done. In collaborative environments, we each get to bring our own tool belts, and that tool belt grows. We can help with communications and storytelling. We can better help with measurement and evaluation. We can better help with strategic planning or any of those needs that our nonprofit leaders are facing when we do it together and pool not just our resources, but our expertise in our communities. And I've seen it just help our individual funding strategies, right? The work we do every day outside of the collaborative space is better and more informed because of our participation in the collaboration. Those of us who are seeking co-funders for future work, that relationship grows when we all first come together around a shared purpose and roll up our sleeves and decide to work together. But the most important thing, and I think what brings all of us together, is impact. Like, how can you expand your impact, and can the collaborative funding models actually achieve that? So in the After School Recovery Fund, it was 7 national foundations who not just provided grant funding to some leading after-school organizations in the months after COVID, but then the leaders of those organizations, those grantees, came together to co-author a report and a case study in Grantmakers for Education and went on a conference circuit to share those best practices and lessons learned back with the philanthropic community. A case study that never would have existed if any one of us funders would have just tried to do this work on its own. There was something to share, something to be learned for all. The Responsible Tech Youth Power Fund started as a 1-year experiment among 3 of us. I see my friend Jess Paul over in the room here. And today it is 12 funders strong with a long-term vision, with increasing and ongoing commitments. But most importantly, the young people that we were seeking to support are actually stepping into the spotlight. Moderating panels with the first partner of California, the CEO of Pinterest, being named to Time's AI 100 list, standing up with courage on Capitol Hill to speak and show their values. It's work that never would have been possible if any one of us foundations would have acted alone. And the Fund for Sport Equity. It's taking flight because the most influential brand in the world led with humility. And they invited other people to come in on the ground floor and help build something new with them. And as a result, this group and others who are now joining this fund are ensuring that every young person in America has access to a high quality and youth-centered youth sport experience, because we believe deeply in the power of sport to help them overcome today's challenges. That systems change, in particular in youth sport, is the only way to ensure that. But what does impact look like? Today, there are 5 cities across the US serving as proof points, as inspiration, doing truly transformational systems change to ensure that young people in those cities have access to environments like that. As a result of the fund, in 5 years, we'll have 25 cities. In each of these cases, the work was only possible because a group of values-aligned funders came together, rolled up their sleeves, and said, we are not co-funders, we are colleagues. We are in it for the long haul. We are here to support each other, to make strategic decisions together, and to meet the moment. So, the question for all of us is, will we meet the moment? What can we each do to punch above our weight? And to answer that, I think we have to ask ourselves a final defining question. Who is your hero? Who is your hero? Is it him? Probably not. I wouldn't be offended. For those asking if I made that exec board in junior year of high school, the answer is no, I didn't. Do I regret my answer? No, I don't. But it might not be Dick Butkus. Perhaps your hero is someone like this. You'd be in good company. According to a 2014 Harris poll, these three historical figures are the most likely individuals to be named as someone's hero. And why? 76% of Americans say that the trait most worthy of admiration is the willingness to stand up for what's right, regardless of personal consequences. Or maybe if it's not them, you are like me, and the third of Americans who say that your hero is someone like this. What have you learned from your heroes? What are they calling you to do? Is it to keep your eye on the ball, swing hard, and follow through? Or maybe it's that when life's problems seem insurmountable, you got to find your people. You have to go together, and you don't settle. Thank you.